Is this the dagger?
G'day guys, JB here. Week 10 of the 2024-25 NBA season is in the books. And as they say, the season is, well, officially underway. Generally, the population will mark Christmas Day as the ultimate tip-off of the NBA season and when things start getting serious. Never mind the first 30 games of the season. They're more concerned now with the 50 that we essentially have between now and the middle of April. Of course, we get around a week and a half break for the All-Star game, and there's a couple of different days in the calendar where no games will be played. An interesting outlook on the season so far, an interesting week with results and certainly how players are panning out and certainly how the season is starting to shape up. So without further ado, let's get into it. Let's get into the Week 10 review for the 24-25 NBA season. Starting in the East and starting with the Hawks. A 3-0 record, 5th in the conference through 10 weeks of basketball, and they have really found a solid identity with their top 8 rotations, their defensive presence, which is something I'm sure a lot of people didn't think was going to appear for this team, and the out-and-out second and third options that continually step up and step out on a week-to-week basis. 3-0 record in Week 10. They are 5th in the East, undefeated on the week, as you can see. Jalen Johnson, another big week, and a guy who's got to be right up there for most improved honours, and a guy who, numbers-wise, by the end of the season, it's going to look a little ridiculous if he's not named an All-Star, and potentially if he's not on an All-NBA team. 24.3 points, 10.7 rebounds, 4.3 assists to go with 2.7 steals and a block, less than 2 turnovers. Just a super efficient week for Johnson, a super productive week for Atlanta, who are really looking like they're going to cement themselves as a top 6 team and genuinely could cause a couple of upsets in the postseason. The Celtics, they remain the second best team in the conference, and they're probably going to maintain their position as the second best team in the conference throughout most of the year, as they manage injuries, as they manage player performance, work management, load management, however you want to put it. 1-2 week, second in the conference still, defeated Indiana. Jaylen Brown with a really nice week for himself. 32.7 points, 5.3 rebounds, 4.3 assists to go with 2.3 steals, less than 3 turnovers. Touched on it briefly there. Going to touch on it again a little more here. Boston are now in a position as a team where they don't need to go hammer and tong, balls to the wall every time that they want to get a win or every time they want to play a game. Their second unit, led by Peyton Pritchard, probably leading 6th Man of the Year honours right now, has been really productive. They've got an elite level All-NBA production out of Brown and Tatum, and you've got a really good defensive combo there in White and Holiday. Celtics are going to be okay. They're just going to cruise through. For the Nets, they have managed to pull off a trade, and I'm not sure whether they're trying to tank here because they've somewhat managed to secure a guy who could probably tandem up with a couple of these guys when they're healthy and make it quite an interesting team. A 1-2 week for the Nets, 12th in the conference. They did defeat Milwaukee. Keon Johnson, a nice week for him. 17 points, 3.7 rebounds, 2 assists, 1.3 steals, 0.7 blocks on 1.7 turnovers. The crucial trade being Dorian Finney-Smith, all but gone out of this team and returning back to where he had his lone All-Star season, D'Angelo Russell. Now, he's teaming back up with Ben Simmons. That was something they had at a very young age. Obviously, it's been close to a decade since they did that, but you'd have to think this is a potential tick in the box here for Ben Simmons. It's certainly a tick in the box here for D'Angelo Russell to be able to go and play. You add in the fact that Cam Johnson's having a nice year, that Cam Thomas has to return at some point. They look like they're trying to bottom out, but I don't know. Brooklyn still seem reasonably competitive at the peak. Over to Charlotte, who once again didn't win a game this week. 13th in the conference, 0-3 record. Miles Bridges, their best player in what has been probably his best week since he returned from those indiscretions. And certainly the performance that a lot of people thought we were going to see consistently out of a Bridges prior to those indiscretions there. 24 points, 12 rebounds, 6.7 assists on the week to go with 0.7 steals, 0.3 blocks on 2.7 turnovers. Yep, I've been pretty hard on Miles Bridges. I think it's fair that I've been reasonably hard on Miles Bridges. But I think the ultimate standout point for Miles Bridges happened during the week when he attempted to do a jersey swap with the guy who's arguably the MVP of the league, Gilgeous-Alexander, and he didn't want anything of it, and Bridges just was left with his tail between his legs. All but deserved, if you ask me. Over to the Bulls, who have started to see a little bit of production out of their players and seeing some key results as of that, and because of that production there. 2-1 record on the week, 9th in the conference, so they're still sitting well and truly in amongst those playing teams. Defeated Milwaukee and defeated Charlotte, so a real yo-yo of opposition there. But Nikola Vucevic passing 16,000 points for his career with a nice week as well. 19.3 points, 11.3 rebounds, 3.7 assists to go, 1.3 steals and 1 turnover a game. Kobe White having a really nice game this week as well. Josh Giddey having a really consistent week. And it's interesting to see when those two guys are involved, when those guys are sharing and distributing the basketball, Chicago are clearly a better team. You can see why they want to invest in them. You can see why they want to turn over that leaf. But the other side of it is Nikola Vucevic has been your most consistent player all year, and he's part of the options to trade away. Who do you trade him for? I don't know, because you're going to need to bring that value back to complement Giddey and White at this point. It's an interesting dilemma for the Bulls. Over to the number one team in the Eastern Conference, and one of the two leading teams in each respective conference to not only come out and compete in an NBA Finals series, but certainly take out the conference title. 2-0 record for the Cavs, undefeated, as you can see. Donovan Mitchell, a really nice week. 28 points, 4 rebounds, 5 assists on average across those two games. 0.5 steals on 2 turnovers. And this Cleveland team, they just continue to be deep. It's any given night, depending on who wants to step up. Donovan Mitchell's been huge. I think Donovan Mitchell's been one of the 10 best players in the league this year. Donovan Mitchell should be in any MVP and All-NBA conversation. Anyone who doesn't believe that just isn't watching Cleveland. But when you've got Darius Garland, when you've got Max Strus, when you've got Caris LeVert, when you've got Evan Mobley, when you've got Jarrett Allen, all of these guys who can step up and really play a role as a number one any given night, it creates a lot of depth and a lot of concern if you're an Eastern Conference opponent. The Cavs could seriously take it out. Detroit with a 1-1 week. They sit 10th in the conference. As I said, they're not going to go much more than the playing team, but considering they were arguably the worst team in the history of basketball last year, it's a huge turnaround for them. Speaking of huge turnarounds, the guy on screen, 25 points, 3 rebounds, 9 assists per game on the week for Cade Cunningham. I go through and my MVP video will be out in the next 48 hours. It's an update every month to the end of the season. I go through and pick a player of each game all season. Cade Cunningham right now is one of the 10 best players in the Eastern Conference. He needs to be an all-star, because if Detroit were winning more games, I can make a serious case that Cade Cunningham has been a top 10 player in the NBA this year. I'm not afraid to say that. Detroit have a real winner here with a guy who's had a lot of finances invested in him. He's going to try and pay that dividend back. Can they get some pieces around him? That's the real question. But right now, Detroit just need to focus on that playing. To the Pacers, they still sit in the playing space as well. They're sitting in 8th. Got the win against Boston, 1-2 record on the week. It's kind of a strange way that they can go about things, Indiana. And I think one way to look at that is particularly the way Siakam has played this week. 17.7 points, 9.7 rebounds, 3.3 assists, 1.3 steals, 0.3 blocks. You can have Siakam do something like that, where he gets a couple more assists, he scores a few more points. All of a sudden, Indiana are 3-0. Now, he is one of your 2-star players. There are going to be nights where he has an off night. But to suggest that the guy is 6 points worse off, lacks the assists there, say they're 10 points off and they don't have someone standing up or stepping out, sort of becomes a concern for exactly where Indiana are at. And you've got to remember, they've invested some serious cash in Halliburton, some serious cash in Siakam, and they're still looking to commit some active trades to try and build this roster. But you're going to have to find someone that's going to willingly make up 12 points a night. To the Heat, who also still sit in that playing window, so Chicago, Detroit, Indiana, Miami, they're all in that little playing bubble right now. 2-1 record though for the Heat, who have gone as high as 5th and 4th in this conference, who have gone as low as 8th and 9th in this conference consistently all throughout the year. Defeated Orlando and Houston, so certainly a couple of nice tick boxes there. Orlando have been really competitive even without their 2 and probably now their 3 best players. Houston, they've been really consistent, a really physical game, a real brawl actually breaking out in that game between Thompson, Yeah, a lot going on in that game. Hero on the week, though, 25 points, 5.3 rebounds, 7 assists, 0.3 steals, and 3.7 turnovers. He has been the catalyst for this Miami team. The main conversation right now around them, though, is exactly what's going to happen with Jimmy Butler. Do they trade him? Who do they go for? If they don't trade him, how do they perform? Right now, with the way Hero's playing, is your best time to trade Butler. The question is, what do you get in return? Milwaukee with a down week, 0-2 record. And despite that, they still look like they can be a top 3 team when they're fit and firing and when they have arguably the MVP of the league in their team. They still look like a top 3 team. No wins on the week, as I mentioned there. Brook Lopez, nice week for him. 21 points, 7 rebounds, 2.5 assists, 2.5 blocks, 1 steal, 0.5 turnovers. He's been really crucial for the Bucks for a number of years now. There's no doubt about it. He's continuing to prove crucial as the years go on. If there's one thing I can say about Brook Lopez, though, he's the epitome of a guy that's been able to transform his game from the start of the small ball era to now. Here's a guy who was a back to the basket, low post scorer, not a great defender, was just a big guy, to all of a sudden he can shoot the 30-footer. He's a really consistent shooter at that. And he's an all-defensive player while scoring 20 points a game. That's a huge turnaround. He's one of the more remarkable players of the last decade. Speaking of remarkable, Mikal Bridges, huge 40-piece on the week, helped lead the Knicks to a 4-0 record. They sit top 3 in the Eastern Conference, undefeated on the week. For the week, though, Bridges, 23 points, 3 rebounds, 4 assists, 2.3 steals, 0.5 blocks and 1.5 turnovers. He's really been able to work his way into the scoring rotation now for the Knicks. Obviously, it's going to be tough to try and find real estate when Karl-Anthony Towns and Jalen Brunson are combining for 50 a night. They're highly efficient scorers. They can shoot the outside ball. They can get inside. They create a presence. People forget, though, that Mikal Bridges, probably the 3rd best player on that Phoenix Suns team during a run that saw them go to the NBA Finals. The crucial trade piece for Kevin Durant. Crucial late-game player for the Nets. A former top 3 defensive player of the year, finishing an all-defensive player, and he's got this kind of skill set. If New York can continue to unlock this, the sky may just be the limit for the Knicks. Orlando with a 1-2 week. They still are clinging on to that top 4 in the Eastern Conference, and they're a side that certainly has shown that, hey, if we can get guys to step up who can play their role, who can still lock in defensively, and we can maintain a bit of a record here, once Banchero's able to get back, we're going to be okay. And when Franz Wagner gets back, we're going to be even better. That's exactly where Orlando are at. And you can sort of see in the way their game plan is being developed right now. That's where they want to stick. Jalen Suggs, nice week for him. 21.3 points, 3.3 rebounds, 2.3 assists to go with 0.7 steals, close to 4 turnovers. But again, you're talking about a team that's clearly lost 2 of their best players. One of them an all-NBA level player. Another guy who was certainly in that top 10 conversation this year. He's probably going to fall out due to injury, which is quite unfortunate. But 2 all-star level players not on your team. Someone like a Batarzi playing really good minutes as well. And Karl-Anthony having huge games. That's the depth Orlando have. They just need to be consistent and keep unlocking it while those 2 players are away. For Philadelphia, well, a 3-0 record. They've jumped up to 11th in the conference, undefeated on the week, and part of it has been crucial because of this guy on screen, Joel Embiid. They're just trying to keep healthy right now, Philly, and if they can and can start really activating their roster, getting them into sets, getting some minutes into them, building some chemistry, then you have another spanner in the works for the Eastern Conference. Things are just starting to turn around a little bit there. Embiid, we know he's been one of the preeminent scorers of the last 5 years and certainly one of the leading scoring big men of the last, well, probably since the turn of the century, if we're going to be honest there. 32 points, 7.7 rebounds, 3 assists, 1.3 steals, 1 block on 3.3 turnovers. I still think that Philadelphia need to continue to build sets around their young guys because we know at some point there has to be an injury that's going to bite them on the backside really hard. Who it's going to be, I don't know, and you hope it's not a young guy, but you have to be understanding that Embiid can do this, but he could also be on the sidelines. To Toronto, the 2nd worst record in the East, and a team that needs some veteran leadership sooner rather than later. And I think purely by getting a couple of veterans, then you do turn things around. I said this about the Spurs last year. If you'd have been able to trade out their bench for veterans and keep the young guys to mentor them, they become a different squad. You save a hell of a lot on cap space too. Maybe Toronto need to consider it. I don't know. 0-2 record, 14th in the conference, no wins on the week. RJ Barrett is still a borderline all-star for me. I don't know whether he's going to get there. Them not winning games and him certainly not performing sometimes is going to hurt. But a nice week for the young fella there. 22.3 points, 7 rebounds, 6.7 assists, 2.7 turnovers. I've spoken about it before. I'll speak about it again. RJ Barrett has consistently been this type of player for most of his career. He did it in New York, and for some reason no one paid attention. Either A, because Julius Randle had a breakout year, or B, Jalen Brunson announced it as his team. So, poor old RJ, having a great season of his career. He's doing it in Toronto. And we move on over to the worst team in the NBA, who got a win this week against Charlotte. Not a bragging point. Bilal Coulibaly, 14.7 points, 5 rebounds, 5.7 assists. This is a young guy who's coming on really nicely, but unfortunately he's doing it in Washington. 0.7 steals, 1.3 blocks on 1.7 turnovers. They're still a bad team, Washington. Cooper Flagg's out there, but does Cooper Flagg want to go from Duke to DC? That's the ultimate question, and I think the answer is probably no. To the Western Conference now, and Dallas have suffered a really crucial blow. It certainly absolutely murdered my preseason predictions. Not that was going to be hard because of the way he's played. But a 1-3 record. They're still fourth in the conference there. They got the win against Phoenix. Nice week there. Spencer Dinwiddie, 16 points, 3.8 rebounds, 3.8 assists, 1 steal, 0.3 blocks on a turnover. Luka Doncic out for at least a month with what is assumed to be a calf strain and a calf injury. Now, obviously they take these fairly serious. We've seen in very recent history in the NBA that if they're not taken seriously, players lose their Achilles. And that all but turns their career south, and turns it south really quickly, unless your name's Kevin Durant. Before that, Dominic Wilkins. So that's going to be interesting. But Dallas have played pretty well without Luka this year, so I think they can still stay in touch. It's going to be a matter of the likes of a Dinwiddie, a Klay Thompson, and certainly a Kyrie stepping up, stepping out, and proving they can get it done. Denver, 2-2 record. They still sit inside the top 6. They are out of the play-in in the West. A win against Detroit and a win against Utah, so you can sort of make of that as you wish. Nikola Jokic, quite weak. Okay, that's tongue-in-cheek. 31.3 points, 15 rebounds and 8.5 assists a game, to go with 2.3 steals and less than 2 turnovers. The guy's shooting over 50% from the field. The guy's shooting close to 50% from deep. He makes 8 out of 10 from the free throw line. He's top 3 in scoring. He's right up there in rebounds. He's top 3 in assists. He's having arguably the season of his career. And Denver managing as well with Russell Westbrook to incorporate him into lineups and get success. So does that speak volumes of Westbrook knowing that Jokic is arguably having a career year? Or does it speak volumes of Jokic that he's able to incorporate a former league MVP into his system and have them perform? You be the judge. The Warriors, they've fallen back into play-in contention. The problem is it just seems like they continue to fall, and I don't really know where they're going to be sitting. A 1-3 record on the week, 10th in the conference, got a win over Phoenix, but Phoenix right now are struggling to find blame for anything, so yeah, I wouldn't necessarily call it a bragging point. They're certainly not the team they were, certainly even to the end of November and the start of December. Jonathan Kuminga, a really nice week, 25 points, 8.8 rebounds, 2.5 assists, continuing to prove he can play in that Kerr system, continuing to prove he can be a key rotational piece. 1.3 steals, 0.5 blocks, and 1.3 turnovers. A lot of conversation around Dennis Schroeder and the impact that he's having or not having with this Warriors team at the moment, which is understandable. This is a guy that was having a nice impact there in Brooklyn. But you've got to understand that his touches aren't the same, his minutes aren't the same, his possessions aren't the same. Therefore, his production isn't going to be the same. To hold him to that expectation doesn't make any sense. It's only going to send the team backwards if you do. The Rockets, they keep trading the second and third position in the conference with Memphis, and we'll get to them very shortly. Currently third in the conference, though, Houston, 1-2 record on the week, defeated New Orleans, as they really should have, because unless you're the Washington Wizards, you should be defeating the New Orleans Pelicans. Alperen Sengun, 22 points, 14.3 rebounds, 4.3 assists. He's just dropped off a little bit there, but in saying that, there's been some nice production by his teammates, which is exactly what you want to see from a Houston standpoint if they're going to progress, if they're going to be competitive. Plenty of times there, Şengün has the opportunity to be the man. There's no doubt about it, and why not? He's got that ability to play a Sabonis-like role or a Jokic-like role. When you've got guys who can play better on the defensive end, when you have guys who are having a hotter hand on the offensive end, night to night, you don't have to put in those big efforts there. While his personal production's certainly going down, you can certainly see that the team is going up and they're going places. Houston should expect to be a second-round team this season. Over to the Clippers, and the man on screen right now making a genuine All-Star case, but he's making a genuine All-NBA case as well. 2-0 record for the Clippers. They're now 5th in the West, undefeated on the week, and a nice run by Norman Powell, who at 6'4" and under is having one of the more efficient scoring seasons for a, quote, smaller guard in recent memory. 30.5 points, 3 rebounds, 1.5 assists per game on the week to go with 2 steals and 0.5 blocks on 3 turnovers. Obviously, the conversation comes round to, well, he's getting better looks because James Harden's his point guard. Okay, but that good. He should be capitalising on those good looks. Any talk about, there's not as much pressure defensively, he doesn't have to get on the boards, he doesn't have to be inside, he doesn't have to be accountable. Zubac is having a good season. Okay, but if that's the standard you're going to hold him to, then 90% of any guard that any player that anyone's ever loved ever certainly has a very much a lower standard than the Norman Powell, who's had a pretty good season for my money. Speaking of guys who are having a good season for their money, this is a guy who flies under the radar in Los Angeles for the simple fact that he plays with LeBron James and Anthony Davis. And that's Austin Reeves, who was the best player for the Lakers this week. 2-0 record. They're now 7th in the conference. They're yo-yoing around as well. They've been as high as 3rd in that conference. They've looked like falling out the backside and not being a playing team. Started to steady a little bit there. Austin Reeves, really nice week. 26.3 points, 8 rebounds, 13 assists a game. 0.5 steals, 4 turnovers there. If Anthony Davis and LeBron James are actually able to activate Austin Reeves to be this kind of player, then the Lakers are going to be a better team. But it all comes down to moving the ball, getting it into sets of hands, giving people opportunities to make plays. That's really the key right now, is that they've given Austin Reeves that license to do so. That's why he's been productive. That's why the team has seen success. It's when there's not enough noise on their superstars and their superstars start to ISO ball that success isn't there. We'll see whether the Lakers can maintain this little run. For the second week in a row, the best player for the Memphis Grizzlies has pretty much been their third option. Desmond Bane, a really nice consistent week. 2-1 record for the Grizzlies on the week. They're now 2nd in the West, and a team that certainly doesn't look like they're falling by the wayside. A team that's certainly going to cause some issues if they really want to come the postseason, certainly on the defensive end. But their offensive set, it's certainly not something that we've encountered in recent basketball history. Got the wins over Toronto and New Orleans as they should. So that's probably the other asterisk that you sit here and go, yep, 2-1 week, but they did defeat 2 of the 5 worst teams in the league, as they really should as the second seed. So what can you do? Desmond Bane, 19.7 points, 6 rebounds, 4.7 assists to go with 1.3 steals, 0.3 blocks on 1.7 turnovers. I don't think Desmond Bane has been a standout consistently this season. He obviously has been the third option behind Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr. But it shows what level of production he can produce when he's given the opportunity. The ironic part about the Minnesota Timberwolves right now, sitting top 8 in the West with a 3-0 record on the week, is the fact that Julius Randle was arguably the best player in it. And people don't really like to think about the fact that Julius Randle may be their best player in any given particular week, because that's not what they brought him in for. They wanted the spotlight thrown all over Anthony Edwards. It hasn't happened as much this season. Certainly a lack of spacing because Karl-Anthony Towns isn't there anymore. The defensive presence is still there. When you've got Gilgeous-Alexander Walker, when you've got McDaniels, when you've got Gobert, you're also going to have a pretty consistent defense. But it's the offensive side of the ball that they've been lacking. Randle certainly can produce that. He did this week, 22 points, 7.3 rebounds, 6.7 assists to go with 0.3 blocks on 3 turnovers. I don't exactly know what it's going to take for Minnesota to turn things around on the offensive end, but consistency is going to be key. Who's that consistent player? Is it Randle or is it Edwards? I'll tell you who does need to turn it around though, and that may just be the second worst team in the NBA. 0-3 once again for the Pelicans. No wins on the week. They're dead last in the West. And that says a lot, because I don't think Portland's been impressive, and I certainly think Utah has been as underwhelming as any team in the last few seasons. CJ McCollum, 26 points, 3 rebounds, 3.7 assists, 0.7 steals, 0.3 blocks on 2 turnovers. I don't know. A crossroads, really, for New Orleans. Don't worry about the crossroads with this team, though, because they are out on the open road. 5-lane freeway, the Autobahn, if you will. Unlimited speed, and no one's catching them anytime soon. 3-0 record for the Oklahoma City Thunder, first in the West. And Shai Gilgeous-Alexander just continues to mount his case for MVP in 24-25. 34 points, 5.7 rebounds, 7 assists on the week to go. 1.3 steals, 2.3 blocks, 2.7 turnovers. Shai is clearly the number one guy on this team. Shai is clearly the number one perimeter player in the NBA. And it's scary to think that a guy who plays both ends so consistently, well, the only criticism of the man is that he goes to the free throw line. Now, that speaks more about the viewership than anything. Not only the decline, but the educated level of the fan. I think that's probably an indicator for the NBA as well, that you've got people watching games that aren't educated on how players play. Probably a big reason you're losing ratings and losing fans really quickly. Over to Phoenix, who continue to be having conversations around trades and who they're going to move, who, what, where, when, where, why, and how. 1-2 week, defeated Denver, which isn't too bad for them, 11th in the conference. Kevin Durant with another nice week, 31 points, 4.3 rebounds, 3 assists to go, 0.7 steals and 2 blocks on 3 turnovers. I don't know whether Durant's going to get the games in to make the All-NBA. I don't know whether Phoenix is going to win enough games to have a contender in the MVP race, but I do know that they're going to really have to try and find someone to put the blame on, because it's evident right now that as much as I love what Devin Booker brings to this team and what Kevin Durant has been able to do, they're not the ones that are going to take onus for this result. That's why you're hearing Jusuf Nurkic's name on the move. That's why you're hearing Grayson Allen's name on the move. That's why you're hearing Bradley Beal's name on the move. You know, it's not the fact that they don't really have a great bench or the fact that their leaders won't step up. They just don't think they have enough help. Unfortunately, in 2024, that narrative isn't going to cut the mustard. To the Trailblazers now, a productive week. 2-1 record, 13th in the conference. They did defeat Utah. They are below them, but Utah somewhat having a couple of consistent weeks, as consistent as you'd like to describe it. And defeated Dallas. Shaedon Sharpe continues to step up and step out. He's had a really crucial impact on this team. Certainly in the limited games he had last year, but certainly in what he's been able to do this year, really stepping up, stepping out, and proving why he is the player for them to buy in on. 20.7 points, 3.7 rebounds, 2.7 assists, 0.3 steals, 0.7 blocks on 1 turnover. There's a lot of talk right now that Portland are going to try and get a lot of these pieces out of there. They're going to try and stick with 1 or 2 young guys and try and go for a full rebuild rather than being real stagnant. That's fine. Who are you going to trade out, though, without absolutely ruining the core and the development of this team? That's where the intricate balance is right now. Yep, you've got players that will complement championship teams, but who are you going to get in return to regrow this franchise? Speaking of franchise regrow, that's exactly what the Sacramento Kings have half committed to in the last week when they decided to get rid of Mike Brown. And the conversation around Mike Brown is that he allegedly had asked DeMar DeRozan to go to the bench. He wanted DeMar DeRozan to come off as a reserve to try and improve this team, to try and improve rotations, to show a bit of leadership. And it didn't happen. Now, don't get me wrong, I have all the praise in the world for Sabonis when he is the man. I don't mind the athletic prowess of a De'Aaron Fox, and I don't mind the mid-range game of DeMar DeRozan. But it's not enough to get a coach sacked who was coach of the year less than 18 months ago. Defeated Dallas on the week, 12th in the conference. De'Aaron Fox on the week, nice performance, 29.3 points, 5.7 rebounds, 7.3 assists, 1.7 steals, 1 block on 2.3 turnovers. Doug Christie, the interim head coach for the Kings, and as a former 4-time All-Defensive selection, hopefully he can instill some progress on that side of the ball for a team that certainly doesn't have any of it. Over to the Spurs, and the Spurs are threatening right now to break into the top 8 of the Western Conference. They just keep going from stride to stride, and generally it's because of the guy on screen. Victor Wembanyama helped get the win against Brooklyn, and he has been a top 5 player in the NBA this year. It's just a shame that they don't have the wins on the board to truly reflect the impact that he has had on his opponents on this season right now. Has to be up there as one of the 2 leaders for Defensive Player of the Year. It's him and Dyson Daniels. The problem is you don't have stats for things that Wemby truly doesn't record, like 3-on-1s where they don't put up a shot. 31.7 points, 11 rebounds, and 3.3 assists on the week to go with 0.7 steals, 4 blocks on 2.7 turnovers. Right now, Wemby's having 3 blocks a game and 3 3-pointers made a game. People want to see what he can do from the inside. That's fine. But if you've got a guy who's going to stretch the floor offensively and maintain it defensively, I wouldn't complain. And finally, over to the Utah Jazz, who had a minor productive week this week. 2-1 record, 14th in the conference, but they did defeat Detroit, who have been a playing team and a team on the rise, and did defeat a Brooklyn team that, well, they have just lost Dennis Schroeder, just acquired, D'Angelo Russell. They've lost Dorian Finney-Smith. Cam Johnson's playing well. Keon Johnson, their player this week. So it's sort of interesting to gauge exactly where Utah are at. Whether they're trying to find their feet, I don't know. I've watched a little bit of Utah. They're certainly not an easy team to watch. They're one of few teams that I've seen that just shouldn't shoot 3-point shots. They're not consistent with them at all. Colin Sexton, 20.3 points, 3 rebounds, 7.7 assists to go, 0.3 steals per game. Utah right now, again, they're pretty thankful that New Orleans are banged up and injured, because we know Ingram and Zion would be able to produce a little more than they have. I don't know. The Jazz just seem to be treading water with no life raft in sight. And there we are. We are 10 weeks through the 2024-25 NBA season. Of course, the next review will include January 25. So we have turned the corner. We are almost halfway through the season. It is certainly ticking over. Of course, the All-Star break is approaching as well. Probably a few key injuries, such as a Banchero or a Chet Holmgren, getting set to come back. How will Orlando look after that return, and certainly what does that do for OKC? We'll soon find out about that. Anyway, guys, that's been me. Thank you for tuning in. My MVP video will drop in the next 48 hours, and that will be the update of the contenders in that award for me as of the end of December. We'll run through the usuals there as far as contendership, the honourable mentions, and the 10. Anyway, guys, that's been me. I'm out.